The Texas sky bled into a canvas of fiery orange and bruised purple, a spectacular but unsettling farewell to the day. Wisps of dark clouds gathered on the horizon, hinting at the storm that raced across the plains, an unseen predator closing in. A lone gas station, its neon sign flickering like a dying pulse, stood as a solitary beacon against the encroaching twilight. The air, thick with the scent of dust and distant rain, suddenly vibrated with a different kind of rumble, a deep, guttural growl that promised trouble. The insistent thrum of multiple engines, closing in fast, was not the sound of a passing truck. This was something else entirely, something far more sinister, painting an immediate sense of unease across the vast, empty landscape. Emily had pushed her old sedan hard, racing against that very storm. The sky's apocalyptic beauty had been a warning she couldn't ignore. Every mile, chewed up by the worn tires, brought her closer to home, to the tiny, familiar comfort of her own bed, but also closer to the storm's furious embrace. She needed gas, and she needed it now. This remote station, a forgotten outpost on the highway, seemed both a blessing and a curse. Its isolation was usually a comfort, a quiet pause in her long commute, but tonight, with that ominous rumble growing louder, it felt like a trap. Her motivation was simple, primal even. Get home. Just get home before the weather broke, before night swallowed the road whole. The image of her cat, probably pacing impatiently by the window, spurred her onward, a small domestic anchor in a rapidly darkening world. As she pulled up to the lone pump, the first drops of rain, fat and heavy, spattered on her windshield. Her hands, still gripping the steering wheel, trembled slightly. A nervous habit she'd picked up during her increasingly stressful job. The gas nozzle clicked into place, and she leaned against her car, scanning the vast, empty expanse. That's when they arrived. A swarm of motorcycles, black leather and chrome flashing under the sickly yellow glow of the station lights, roared into the lot. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of engines and harsh laughter that seemed to mock the quiet of the Texas evening. They pulled up in a ragged semicircle, effectively boxing in her sedan, cutting off any easy escape. The group was large, maybe 10 or 12 men, each exuding an aura of menace that was almost palpable. Their leathers were worn, their faces hardened by sun, and something far less benign. One, a hulking figure with a braided beard and a skull patch on his vest, dismounted his bike with a theatrical flourish, his eyes dark and predatory, immediately locking onto Emily. Another, younger, with a sneer etched permanently onto his face, sauntered closer, his gaze lingering on her with an unsettling familiarity. Well, what do we have here? The younger one drawled, his voice thick with an implied threat. His companions chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. The leader, the one with the braided beard, simply watched, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the overwhelming silence of the approaching storm and the menacing growl of the bikes. She felt exposed, vulnerable, an unwitting deer caught in the headlights of a predator's hunt. The gas pump continued its steady click, but the rhythmic sound offered no comfort, no sense of normalcy. This wasn't normal. This was a nightmare unfolding under the dying light of a Texas sunset, and she was trapped. The rain began to fall in earnest now, mingling with the sweat beading on Emily's forehead. The wind picked up, swirling dust devils around the tires of the motorcycles, as if nature itself was adding to the chaotic scene. The bikers exchanged glances, their silent communication a terrifying ballet of intimidation. They were enjoying this, drawing it out, savoring her fear. The younger one took another step closer, his shadow falling over her, blocking the last remnants of the fading light. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, scanned her up and down, making her feel like an object, not a person. "Lost little lady," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension and something far more sinister. The others laughed again, a chorus of dark amusement. Each taunt, each predatory gaze chipped away at Emily's composure. She gripped the gas nozzle tighter, her knuckles white. The cold metal was her only anchor in a world suddenly turned hostile. The storm was coming, but a different kind of storm had already arrived. If you're captivated by stories of courage in the face of danger, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. The roar of the motorcycles had momentarily subsided, replaced by the unsettling quiet of predatory expectation. Emily, frozen by the pump, felt her heart hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The initial unease had curdled into a palpable dread as the bikers, a dozen strong, moved with a synchronized menace, encircling her like wolves scenting prey. Their leather jackets, adorned with crude, intimidating patches, seemed to absorb the last vestiges of daylight, casting long, distorted shadows that danced ominously around her. Her initial hope of a quick refuel and escape had vanished, replaced by a suffocating sense of vulnerability. One of the bikers, a burly man with a handlebar mustache and a glint in his eye that spoke of practiced cruelty, sauntered closer. He reached out, his greasy fingers brushing against the side mirror of her car, a deliberate, possessive gesture that made her skin crawl. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered, his voice a gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the gas station's worn concrete. "Lost little birdie?" Another biker, younger, with a cruel smirk etched across his face, leaned against a pump, blocking her path, effectively severing her last imagined escape route. Their laughter, a harsh, guttural sound, echoed mockingly in the vast, empty expanse of the Texas evening. This wasn't just playful harassment. It was a calculated display of power, a test of her resolve. The leader, a tall, gaunt man with eyes that held a chilling intelligence, remained slightly apart, observing, a puppet master pulling invisible strings. His presence, though less outwardly aggressive, was far more chilling. He was known only as Snake in these parts, a notorious figure whose gang, the Desert Vipers, had carved out a reputation for themselves with a string of disturbances across the county. Rumors of their casual brutality and complete disregard for local law enforcement painted a grim picture. Tales whispered in hushed tones in roadside diners and dusty small-town bars. They were a law unto themselves, a dangerous current flowing just beneath the surface of the quiet, rural landscape. Emily had heard the stories, dismissed them as exaggerated local lore, but now, facing their cold, hard reality, a wave of despair washed over her. She was alone, isolated, and utterly at their mercy. Just as the burly biker took another step towards her, his hand reaching for her car door, a new sound cut through the suffocating tension. It began as a distant, almost imperceptible thrum, a low growl that vibrated deep in the chest. It grew steadily, rapidly, evolving into a powerful, resonant roar that commanded attention, a symphony of brute force and refined engineering. The bikers, momentarily distracted, exchanged glances, their confident sneers wavering. The sound was distinct, familiar yet potent, unlike anything their own crude machines could produce. Then, around the bend, bathed in the last fiery streaks of the setting sun, it appeared. A classic 1969 Ford Mustang, a pristine midnight blue machine, its chrome gleaming, its engine a throaty declaration of intent. It moved with an effortless grace, a predator gliding into the den of lesser beasts. Behind the wheel, a man sat silhouetted, his profile sharp against the fading light. He was a cowboy, unequivocally. A wide-brimmed hat, weathered and familiar, obscured his features, but his posture, relaxed yet alert, spoke volumes. He drove slowly, deliberately, pulling up to the pump directly opposite Emily's car. The powerful engine simmered down to a low, rhythmic idle, a pulse of raw power that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The sudden, unexpected arrival of this solitary figure in his iconic machine had an immediate, undeniable effect. The aggressive laughter and taunts of the bikers died away, replaced by an uneasy silence. The air crackled with a different kind of tension now, an unspoken challenge laid bare under the fading Texas sky. The sudden hush following the Mustang's arrival was fleeting, quickly replaced by a low, guttural growl that rippled through the biker gang. Cole, with an almost unnerving calm, had simply stepped out of his car, his posture radiating an unyielding resolve that seemed to momentarily short-circuit the biker's usual bravado. His eyes, shielded by the brim of his weathered hat, swept over the scene, acknowledging each menacing face without a flicker of fear. Emily, huddled against the convenience store's glass, watched him, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Fear still held her captive, a cold knot in her stomach, but a strange, fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl within her. This man, an unexpected apparition in the Texas twilight, carried an aura that both soothed and intensified the volatile atmosphere. The gang leader, a hulking figure with a sneer etched permanently onto his face, was the first to recover his composure. He stepped forward, his heavy boots scuffing the dusty asphalt, every movement designed to project dominance. His men, a snarling pack, closed ranks behind him, their engines rumbling in a synchronized chorus of menace. They were accustomed to immediate capitulation, to their presence alone being enough to send most people scurrying. Cole's serene indifference was an affront, a challenge they weren't used to encountering in such desolate corners of the state. It was clear their initial confidence, though not entirely shaken, had received a subtle jolt. This wasn't the usual frightened gas station attendant or weary traveler. This was different. "Well, well, well," the leader drawled, his voice a gravelly rumble that cut through the still air. He stopped a few feet from Cole, a menacing smile stretching his lips. "Looks like we got ourselves a real hero here. Come to save the pretty little lady, have we?" His gaze flickered towards Emily, a predatory glint in his eyes that made her instinctively shrink back. The taunt hung heavy in the air, a direct challenge to Cole's unspoken intervention. The other bikers chuckled, a harsh, unpleasant sound that resonated with their leader's mockery. They were testing the waters, pushing the boundaries, trying to gauge the extent of this stranger's resolve. Cole remained silent, his hands resting lightly at his sides, his stillness an almost impossibly strong counterpoint to the raucous aggression surrounding him. He didn't flinch, didn't react to the provocation, simply held the gaze of the gang leader with an intensity that held its own power. It wasn't defiance born of arrogance, but an unwavering inner strength that seemed to confound the hardened criminals. The leader's smile wavered slightly, a hint of genuine puzzlement crossing his face. He had expected bluster or fear, or perhaps even a foolhardy attempt at a fight, not this quiet, unyielding presence. "Cat got your tongue, cowboy?" the leader pressed, stepping closer, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. He leaned in slightly, invading Cole's personal space, a classic intimidation tactic. "Or are you just enjoying the show? Let me tell you, this ain't no rodeo, friend. This is our territory." He gestured broadly at the gas station, as if claiming it as his personal domain. His objective was clear: provoke a reaction, shatter Cole's composure, force him to break. The tension in the air was palpable, thick and suffocating, each passing second stretching the standoff to its breaking point. Emily could barely breathe, her eyes darting between the unyielding cowboy and the increasingly agitated gang leader, knowing that a single wrong move could ignite an explosion of violence. The fate of the evening, and perhaps her own, hung precariously in the balance. The leader's patience was visibly thin, his hand instinctively moving towards his belt, a subtle yet unmistakable threat. Cole's eyes, a steely blue, finally met the leader's. There was no anger, no fear, only a deep, unsettling calm that seemed to penetrate the biker's bravado. He didn't speak, but his gaze conveyed a clear, unspoken message. This wasn't going to end the way they envisioned. It was a silent assertion of boundaries, a wordless declaration that this territory, at this moment, belonged to something more powerful than their collective menace. The gang leader, despite his aggressive posture, visibly hesitated. He was a man accustomed to reading threats, to sensing weakness, and in Cole he found neither. Instead, he encountered an immovable object, a force that simply absorbed his aggression without yielding. The other bikers, for the first time, began to shift uneasily, their initial confidence wavering under the silent pressure emanating from Cole. They had witnessed enough street brawls and barroom fights to know when a situation was turning sour, when the odds, despite appearances, were suddenly not in their favor. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that held more menace than any shout, Cole reached into his pocket. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Emily braced herself, expecting a weapon, a sudden flare of violence. Instead, Cole pulled out a worn leather wallet, opening it to reveal a small, tarnished silver badge. He didn't flash it, didn't present it as an official decree, but simply held it, allowing the light from the gas station canopy to glint off its surface. It was enough. The gang leader's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, his bravado instantly deflating like a punctured tire. The other bikers saw it too, a ripple of understanding and sudden, cold apprehension passing through them. The badge, though old and unassuming, spoke volumes. It wasn't about the law in a formal sense, but about a different kind of authority, one deeply rooted in the unspoken codes of the Texas frontier, a respect for order that even outlaws understood. The confrontation, which moments before had promised an explosion, dissipated like smoke in the wind. The leader, his face now a mask of reluctant deference, took a step back, then another. He exchanged a quick, meaningful glance with his men, a silent order passing between them. The rumbling engines, which had been a symbol of their dominance, now seemed to purr with a defeated note. "All right, cowboy," the leader muttered, his voice stripped of its earlier swagger, replaced by a grudging capitulation. Looks like we made a mistake. Won't happen again. Not here." The implicit threat, however, hung heavy in that last word. The gas station might be off limits, but the rest of the world, vast and untamed, was still fair game. With a final lingering glare at Cole, a silent promise of future reckoning, the gang leader turned and swung his leg over his motorcycle. The other bikers followed suit, their movements now hurried, their earlier swagger replaced by an almost palpable desire to escape the unsettling presence of the quiet cowboy. One by one, their engines roared to life, a cacophony of sound that quickly faded into the night as they sped away, leaving behind only the scent of exhaust fumes and a profound, ringing silence. Emily watched them go, her heart still hammering against her ribs, but the suffocating fear was slowly giving way to an immense sense of relief and something else. A burgeoning curiosity about the man who had brought such an abrupt end to her ordeal. The gas station, moments ago a crucible of tension, was now eerily quiet, bathed in the harsh glow of the overhead lights. Cole slowly replaced the badge in his wallet, tucking it away as if it were simply a personal memento. He turned to Emily, and for the first time, their eyes truly met. There was no triumphant smirk on his face, no self-congratulatory air, only a steady, reassuring calm. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, the first words she had heard him speak. It wasn't a question burdened by expectation, but a simple, genuine inquiry. Emily found her voice, though it was still a little shaky. "Yes," she managed, a breath of gratitude escaping her lips. "Yes, thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." She looked around the now deserted station, then back at him, a myriad of emotions swirling within her. Relief was paramount, but also a profound sense of awe and an unexpected vulnerability. He had saved her, not with violence, but with an almost mystical authority. An unspoken connection, a shared moment of danger and deliverance, had been forged between them in the heart of the Texas night. The subtle promise of retaliation from the departing bikers, however, was a chilling reminder that this immediate peace might be fleeting. The immediate danger passed, but the ripples of the gas station incident spread rapidly through the scattered ranches and small towns comprising that rural Texas community. Like wildfire across dry plains, news of the biker gang's brazen harassment and the mysterious cowboy's quiet intervention became the primary subject of every coffee shop conversation, every feed store chat, and every porch-side gossip session. People whispered about the sheer audacity of the gang, their reputation for trouble, already well established, now cemented in the public consciousness with this dramatic display. Yet, equal parts awe and bewilderment surrounded Cole. Nobody seemed to know him, at least not well. He was a shadow, a whisper, a man who appeared when needed, and then receded into the vastness of the landscape. Old rivalries began to resurface, subtle fractures within the community, widening slightly under the pressure of this new narrative. Some locals, those who valued tradition and quiet strength, immediately hailed Cole as a hero, a symbol of the old Texas spirit standing up to modern menace. They admired his stoicism, his refusal to be drawn into the gang's theatrics, and the decisive yet bloodless manner in which he had de-escalated the volatile situation. These were the ranchers and farmers, weathered by years of hard work, who understood the power of a firm stance and unwavering resolve. They saw in Cole a reflection of their own values, perhaps just a more polished, less talkative version. However, a vocal minority regarded Cole with suspicion, their eyes narrowed by skepticism. They questioned his sudden appearance, his almost too perfect timing, and his unusual lack of social ties within a community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Was he truly a benevolent protector, or an outsider bringing more trouble than he solved? Some speculated he might even be connected to the gang in some obscure way, perhaps an old score being settled, or a territorial dispute playing out under the guise of heroism. Whispers of his mysterious past, his solitary existence, and the rare sightings of his classic Mustang only fueled these doubts. There was a natural distrust for the unknown in these parts, a fear of anything that disrupted the established, albeit sometimes stagnant, order. For Emily, the incident left an indelible mark, a raw nerve exposed to the harsh Texas sun. The lingering fear was a constant companion, a ghost of adrenaline that resurfaced with every unfamiliar engine sound, every shadow that moved too quickly. She found herself scanning faces in crowds, her senses heightened, a vigilance born of that terrifying afternoon. Yet, intertwined with this fear, was an unexpected surge of gratitude and an undeniable curiosity about Cole. His image was burned into her memory. The calm eyes, the weathered hands, the quiet confidence that had pierced through the biker's aggressive bravado. He had been her rock, her unexpected savior in a moment of utter helplessness. The memory of their brief exchange, the shared glances, the unspoken understanding, replayed in her mind like a cherished yet fragile film. She found herself wondering about him, this silent cowboy who had materialized from the dust and then vanished almost as quickly. Who was he? What kind of life did he lead? The encounter had shattered the mundane rhythm of her days, introducing an element of profound uncertainty, but also an intriguing possibility. Her life, once predictable and focused solely on her path home, now felt irrevocably altered. The experience had unlocked something within her, a recognition of vulnerability, but also a burgeoning sense of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She had faced true danger and survived, thanks to a stranger. This new reality, a blend of fear and a strange, budding hope, was a heavy cloak she now wore, compelling her to look beyond the immediate horizon. She knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something much larger, a story that had only just unfurled its first pages. The gas station incident was not an isolated event. It was a catalyst, setting into motion forces that would inevitably collide once more. Cole, the enigmatic figure who had so unexpectedly intervened, carried a past as worn and dusty as the Texas landscape he traversed. He wasn't just a cowboy. He was a relic of a bygone era, a man whose principles were etched as deeply as the lines on his weathered face. Raised on a remote ranch, he'd learned self-reliance and a quiet strength that made him stand out in a world increasingly loud and chaotic. His stoicism wasn't indifference, but a carefully constructed shield built over years of personal loss and disillusionment. The Mustang, that gleaming blue beacon of classic American muscle, was more than just a car. It was a tangible link to his father, a man who had taught him the value of standing up for what was right, even when it meant standing alone. It represented freedom, a connection to open roads and untamed spirit, a stark contrast to the confining expectations of society. He often kept to himself, preferring the company of vast empty spaces to the unpredictable nature of people, a solitude that had earned him a reputation as both an oddity and, to some, a whispered legend. The biker gang, true to their menacing promise, didn't disappear after the gas station incident. Their retaliation was insidious, a slow, festering wound across the community. Ranches surrounding the gas station began reporting strange occurrences: fences cut, livestock mysteriously disappearing, and equipment sabotaged. Local businesses, particularly those not under the protection of larger, more established chains, found their supplies delayed or vandalized. Trucks carrying goods into town often arrived with slashed tires or broken headlights. The small diner on the outskirts, a beloved community staple, suddenly found its windows smashed one morning, its cash register empty. The silent intimidation escalated into open acts of aggression designed to instill fear and demonstrate their pervasive influence. The law, stretched thin across vast rural counties, seemed powerless to stop them, their resources insufficient to combat a group so organized and ruthless. A palpable fear began to settle over the community, a shadow that dimmed the bright Texas sun and eroded the residents' sense of security. The once vibrant, trusting atmosphere was slowly replaced by suspicion and anxiety. It was during this escalating period of unease that Emily and Cole's paths inevitably crossed again. Emily, still shaken by the gas station encounter but now fueled by a quiet determination, recognized Cole at the local hardware store. He was selecting fencing supplies, his gaze distant, his movements economical. There was a shared understanding in their brief initial exchange, a silent acknowledgement of the threat that now loomed over their lives. She found herself drawn to his calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. As the weeks passed, their interactions became more frequent, often chance encounters that evolved into longer conversations. Emily learned about the encroaching threats to the ranches, the quiet desperation of her neighbors. Cole listened to her fears, but also to her ideas, her surprising resilience. He found a strange solace in her presence, a connection that slowly began to chip away at his carefully constructed emotional walls. He saw in her not just a damsel in distress, but a woman with her own quiet strength, a spirit that refused to be truly broken. She, in turn, found in Cole a steady anchor, someone she could trust implicitly in a world that suddenly felt dangerous and unpredictable. Their bond deepened, forged in the crucible of shared adversity, a silent promise of solidarity against the encroaching darkness. They were two solitary figures, drawn together by circumstance, finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence amidst the growing storm. The escalating troubles finally pushed Cole to action, but not in the way anyone expected. He had spent weeks observing the bikers' patterns, their preferred routes, their moments of vulnerability, all without anyone noticing his watchful eyes. Emily, through her newfound connections within the community, became an invaluable, if unofficial, intelligence network. She gathered hushed whispers from the diner, observations from farmers whose land bordered the gang's makeshift camps, and even vague descriptions of their preferred hangout spots from store clerks. She never directly confronted the gang, nor did she put herself in harm's way. But her keen sense of observation and her innate ability to connect with people provided Cole with critical pieces of the puzzle. She understood his quiet resolve, the way his mind worked in intricate calculations rather than impulsive aggression. He wasn't seeking a brawl, he was planning a comprehensive solution. Cole's strategy was born from his deep understanding of the land and its forgotten corners. He knew every back road, every hidden trail, every abandoned structure within a 100-mile radius. His plan wasn't about a violent confrontation, but a total disruption of their operation, a tactical dismantling of their influence. One moonless night, the blue Mustang, now a silent shadow, cut through the vast Texas plains. Cole wasn't alone. He had quietly enlisted a few trusted, grizzled ranchers who had long suffered under the gang's intimidation. These men, old and weathered, knew the land as well as he did, and their resolve was as strong as their calloused hands. They weren't looking for a fight either, but for peace. The climactic moment arrived not in a blaze of gunfire, but with meticulous, coordinated precision. While the main body of the gang was away, conducting one of their petty raids, Cole and his small team moved. They disabled vehicles, not beyond repair, but enough to strand them. They identified and dismantled the gang's communication equipment, rendering their coordinated efforts impossible. Crucially, they located and discreetly informed the county sheriff, providing irrefutable evidence of the gang's larger, more serious criminal activities. The drug running, the stolen goods, the illicit operations that extended far beyond simple vandalism. The law, now armed with actionable intelligence and backed by a community's silent strength, moved in. The bikers returned to chaos, their base compromised, their command structure shattered, their vehicles useless. Without their mobility, their communication, and their sense of impunity, the gang dissolved into disarray, many arrested, others scattering into the night, never to re-establish their stranglehold on the community. It was a victory achieved through intelligence, strategy, and an intimate knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses rather than brute force. With the biker menace finally neutralized, a profound sense of relief washed over the community. The fear that had gripped the small Texas towns for months began to dissipate like morning mist under the rising sun. Fences were repaired, businesses slowly recovered, and the old diner with its new windows became a symbol of resilience. The air was lighter, the laughter louder, and the trust among neighbors, once fractured, slowly began to knit itself back together. Cole, true to his nature, didn't seek accolades. He simply retreated to his quiet life, the Mustang once again a familiar sight on the dusty roads. Yet, something had undeniably shifted within him. The deep solitude that had defined him for so long was now tempered by a subtle warmth, a quiet acknowledgement of new connections. Emily, too, was transformed. The terrified girl huddling in a gas station office was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her place. She became an integral part of the community, no longer just passing through, but actively contributing, helping to rebuild and foster the renewed sense of unity. Her experiences had taught her courage and the importance of standing up, not just for herself, but for others. While Cole remained a man of few words, his gaze held a quiet understanding whenever their paths crossed. Their bond, forged in adversity, remained unspoken yet profoundly present. He found himself lingering a moment longer, a subtle smile often gracing his lips, a rare sight for a man who had once seemed irrevocably alone. The community, once burdened by fear, was now at peace, its spirit rekindled, its future brighter. And for those who witnessed the quiet resolve of the cowboy and his blue Mustang, the legend of their unexpected hero only grew. We hope you enjoyed this tale of resilience, courage, and unexpected heroes. For more stories that grip your heart and spark your imagination, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Next time,